With this video we want to show you how to paint a model, in this case a speeder, using the new Dual Exo paints. These new paints are acrylic, and like you can see here, they come in pairs or individually. You can find them sold individually in stores. The reason for grouping them is to help with the task of creating lights and shadows. So there are two colors in a set, and their tones are different, so that if we use this color as the base, we can darken it with this one, and if we use this one as the base, we can lighten it up with this other one. We will use these colors to paint and modulate the model. Perhaps we will need to add a little bit of white to achieve maximum lights, or a bit of black, depends. But we will show you how to use them with an airbrush. In the box of the model you can find the details of the placement of the pieces in the sprue as well as building instructions. There are many people who prefer to build the model completely first and then paint it. However, when there is an interior, obviously it will be more comfortable to paint the interior first and then assemble the rest. In this specific case, in which we will be modulating our model, and this is always done by panels, perhaps it could be more interesting to leave the model completely disassembled and paint it piece by piece. This is because modulating requires masking and taping, and so you may find it more comfortable to do it the way I'm going to do it. You can see that my interior is completely painted, but it's not assembled at all. So what I'm going to do is start by applying the color on each part of the model, on panels and so on, applying the lights, shadows, and only then I'll assemble it. Since the unions are quite good, and moreover they'll be helpful to separate the color, we can apply one tone here and another tone here. This is okay because we are modulating, and when we glue the pieces together, the union will have a different color. That's what this is about. With that in mind, I'm going to paint the pieces separately and then we'll put them together. What will we need for painting? Obviously we'll need an airbrush, thinner for the paint, which is a specific Dual Exo thinner, and the paint. The important thing when it comes to working with an airbrush is to use the correct pressure, and the correct pressure would be between 1.1 and 1.3 bars. I typically remove the end part, the end cap, because acrylic paints, and obviously these are acrylic paints as well, have thicker pigments, which can accumulate in the tip, and so if we see that there are bubbles forming in our paint cap, we will clean the needle with a brush and some thinner, and then continue painting. So we'll prepare the paint and start painting. As you can see, I've prepared the lower part. I've used a wooden stand to hold it, so that I can paint it easily. We'll prepare our paint. For now, we'll use the darker tone. And, as I mentioned, the corresponding thinner. We have a brush ready, we'll get some thinner here for when we need to clean up. And we'll fill up our airbrush. We'll add the thinner, and now the paint. The proportion is approximately 40 to 55% paint, and the rest will be thinner. We close it well, and although you cannot see it, I've put on a mask because it's important to work safely. Remember that the room we're going to be painting in should be ventilated well. Alright, so let's get to it. As you can see, I'm applying the paint directly onto the plastic. We don't need to prime it first. The idea is to paint the entire lower part little by little. And now the inferior part has been painted. We can clean up with a brush the paint that has accumulated on the tip. And we could continue painting. When it comes to the side parts, we'll apply the color only up to the middle, more or less, and it's the darker color. We'll airbrush it from below. Later, we'll apply the lighter color, and we'll do that from above. For now, we'll need to apply the dark color, but from below. Moreover, we'll only cover up the lower area. Let's apply the second color, okay? To continue with our vehicle. What I'll apply now will be a 50% mixture of these two colors, and I'll apply this mixture in the upper area. I'll put both on the palette and mix them in the paint cup of the airbrush. Okay, I'll add a bit of thinner as well. And I'll place the piece on a stand with some blue tack so that I don't get dirty. Now the airbrush is ready, and I'll proceed to fill it up. First, I'll pour in some thinner, and afterwards I can prepare the mixture directly in the airbrush. It will be a 50-50 mixture. I'm adding one color and then the other equally. And since I need it to be light for the maximum lights, I'll now add a bit more of the darker tone. Let's see what our extract looks like. It might need a bit more thinner. Now we're ready. Okay, so let's try and airbrush the upper part. Later we can apply the maximum lights. To create volumes. A detail to keep in mind. Do you see what I meant with the bubbles? So now with a bit of thinner, we can clean the needle. The end part. And now we can continue without formation of these bubbles. As you can see, we have finished painting the base of all the pieces. We have used the two colors that come in the set, and what we've done is to use the darker color on the lower parts and the lighter color on the upper parts. When it comes to the smooth parts, you can see that there is a difference between the vertical part and the one that's horizontal. We've achieved this by making mixtures of these colors. What we are going to do now is to modulate, okay? For that, we'll use the same colors, but we'll add tape to create masks and cuts between the paint. You'll see it soon enough. So, before starting to modulate, something that's important to do is to varnish using the satin varnish. The reason we're going to do this is this. There are still details that we need to paint by brush using acrylic paint. And so there are two reasons for varnishing. First, we'll need to place the decals. And the other reason is because of those details that I mentioned. If we varnish after painting the details with a brush, all will look more or less uniformly. And what's the interesting thing? To distinguish between the bodywork, the chassis on one end, and the details on the other. Because the shine won't be the same. There will be matte details, there will be glossy details, satin ones, it depends. But if we varnish at the end, we'll give it all a uniform appearance. So we'll varnish now, then we'll paint the details with a paintbrush and apply the modulation. That's something that we can do in parallel. For now, for varnishing, why do I choose this kind of lacquer varnish? Simply because this type of varnish is resistant when it comes to different treatments and wear and damages that we make with effects and different enamels, whether that's white spirit or any other product. And so this kind of varnish, lacquer, is ideal, precisely because it withstands all these treatments. Let's start varnishing. I have the airbrush filled and ready, and varnishing is very simple. When using the airbrush, we'll be adding the varnish and the thinner in a proportion of 40 to 60 or 50-50, whatever you find more comfortable. The important thing is to varnish the piece well. So we'll varnish it, and then we can continue with the process of modulation and painting of extra details by brush. I move the airbrush away from the piece so that the flow can cover more surface. The goal is to achieve a more or less uniform and satin appearance. Afterwards, we can start to modulate on top of this coat. When you see that a couple of coats have already been applied, like here, it will be enough. I covered well all the details. And we need to leave it to dry for a couple of hours, even if we don't like to respect the drying times. It's good to give the varnish some space so that it can dry well and we can continue working. I'll consider it finished, and you can observe what it looks like now. Well, now we'll continue with the modulation and painting of the details. After we've varnished all the pieces, we'll start to modulate. Modulation is nothing other than marking the panels, reliefs or profiles of the model. Before, we've used the two blue colors, and for the modulation we'll use the light blue and add a bit of white to it. I typically put it on the palette and make the mixture, and then I'll add it to the airbrush. So, as you can see, the difference between this piece and this one is obvious. All the panels are visible, and we've achieved this by using the masking tape and applying a very light coat of the white color, the white with the blue. So take a look at these two pieces where we have marked the panels. Let's go ahead and do a brief test so that you can see how it works and what it consists of. As you can see, I've taped the piece, the areas that I don't want to get dirty, and I'll add the light mixture to the airbrush. Okay, it's gotta be very subtle. So let's do a small shadow, a small light. And now we'll uncover it. The relief that we wanted to add is clear now. Then we'll add shadows to the other side so that the volumes are even more obvious. In summary, that's what paneling is, what we need to do. Simply masking and then painting. With that, we can panel and modulate the colors so that there's difference. With the bigger piece, we can start with the upper part, for which we don't need to use the masking tape. So what we are going to do is to apply the light in the upper part, and later we'll mask. Now we can start to mask and work on the rest of the volumes. Let's apply another light here. And now we just continue masking. As you can see, The process is to apply the masking tape, remove it, and then the panel is marked. And now I'll mask in the lower part again. And we repeat the same process. Be careful, because painting with a paint that's so diluted can very easily result in the so-called spider webs. See? And just like that, step by step, I'll mask the entire piece. I'm covering it up and marking all the reliefs and panels until we're finished.